Hey, by the way, we're an 8A company. You could set this aside for 8A, or you could just award me the contract. No need to compete it.
There are some limitations.
Does the $800,000 net worth include your home?
It's really a very powerful tool.
That's a big advantage for a company going in to be able to avoid that competition. Well, Kevin Mulrennan, thanks for coming on the podcast and the YouTube video.
Absolutely. Thanks
Yeah.
for inviting me.
One of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because I think you know more about the 8A program than anyone that I've ever met in my life. And, I've met a lot of people in the 8A area, and we work with a similar client. And so I've gotten to work with you over the past few months, and I thought it would be a great idea to have you on. It would really help a lot of people in our audience, understand the 8A program and all of that. But yeah, if you want, could we first maybe dig into your background a little bit and just kind of learn a little bit about Kevin?
Absolutely. I've spent about half of my career working in the 8A world. I'm an aerospace engineer. I've spent most of my career doing defense contracting, government contracting with the federal government. I started with a small individually owned 8A early in my career, supporting the Army. I spent about 10 years supporting a tribally owned 8A company, helped grow them and ultimately sell them to a large defense contractor. I've also worked with, more traditional small business contractors and one or two large defense contractors as well. So I have experience on both the small and the large business side of federal government contracting, and more specifically, as you asked, on the 8A side of the business as well.
Okay. So some people that are watching this may be asking the question, what is 8A? So maybe let's start there.
Sure. Yeah. So bring it right to the top. Yeah. The 8A program that really refers to the section of the code, the Small Business Administration code, that describes a program to help develop and ultimately have sustainable small businesses supporting the DoD and the federal government. It's also a program to help two primary categories of people who are socially and secondly, economically disadvantaged. So the key criteria to be qualified as an 8A company is that you have to demonstrate that society has generally provided you with less advantage than other peoples and other groups. And then the second aspect is the economically disadvantaged aspect of that. There are some very specific thresholds that the government has set for the economic side. The socially disadvantaged aspect is much more subjective, but the economic one has much more specific thresholds, and they're higher than you might expect, or someone that's considered small or disadvantaged. On the economic side, the threshold, I believe today, are around $100,000 of net worth, and a salary or an income of around $400,000. So they're higher than a lot of people think on the economic side. It's a program to try to develop sustainable small businesses to support the federal government.
Okay. And so within the economic parameters, does the $800,000 net worth include your home? The GovClose certification is generating tremendous results. So 27 years old, you've never worked in government contracting, you've never worked as a consultant, and you just closed your first deal. Is that correct?
That's fair. And I've got a couple small projects on the side as well. So definitely probably my best investment I've made all year.
It would be my second post on how a cold call landed a 9-figure government contract. My name's Gavin Tice.
So my name is Ethan Mart. When I was able to enroll into the GovClose program, it just exceeded all my expectations and really has provided a lot of valuable learnings and insights that I would not have found on my own.
I was able to get a consulting gig with a software company that currently works with the intelligence community. Hi, I'm Deb Diller-Harris.
If you want to learn how to sell to the government, if you want to learn how to start your own consulting business, if you want to learn the skills that you need to go land a 6-figure plus account executive job with big companies selling to the government, the certification program is for you, head on over to govclose.com. Check out our certification program. Talk to the team. You won't regret it.
No, that is actually a specific exclusion from the value. So, yeah, they don't want to come to anything related to at least your primary residence. Yeah.
Okay. And I think that's one of the key points, right? And you bring up, specifically you mentioned how it's higher, some of those economic standards than a lot of people think.
Yeah.
And so what I've seen is a lot of companies, a lot of people that thought they would be disqualified from applying for 8A or getting into that program because their house is worth $900,000 or something, just over the years. And then only to find out, oh, actually, I do qualify for this.
Mm-hmm.
And, as far as the first parameter, so if I belong to a group that has experienced discrimination or something over, it's just, so there's a process of proving that or maybe even registering in that group. Is that how that works?
Yeah. And often, if in most cases, it's a racial bias that you're demonstrating against your group. But there can be other types of discrimination, as you mentioned, right? So there can be other types of discrimination that you, as part of your group, may experience over your life or historically throughout the history of the United States. And so that's how you prove you're socially disadvantaged.
So Red Sox fan, can I go in there and, 3-hour World Series win?
Yeah.
So joking aside, but gender, right? Gender can qualify. I've certainly met people that were 8A qualified, specifically a woman-owned business that I know, where she didn't necessarily fit into one of the racial groups that you would think of as, receiving that type of bias or whatever. But certainly you can prove gender inequality.
Absolutely.
You could qualify that way. Okay, so we talked about a little like, hey, why does it exist? What are the parameters for kind of getting into it? How does it help?
Yeah, so it's really a very powerful tool for the federal government, and it really does provide lots of advantages for fledgling new small businesses trying to establish themselves in the federal government marketplace. Most specifically, I guess there are two that come to mind. One is the government often has set-asides, right, that I'm sure you've talked about before with your audience. And 8A is one of those set-asides. So there are certain procurements that the government will say only 8A qualified or 8A certified companies can compete for. So that's one. The second is that 8A companies can get sole source contracts. So if a company is able to build a relationship and offer a product or a service that a federal government customer is interested in, that customer can contract directly with that 8A entity without having to compete that contract. So that's a very powerful tool, as you know.
I'm sure a lot of people listening have heard me describe why I think that's powerful. Why do you think that's powerful?
Well, as I'm sure you and lots of others know, the typical procurement process is long, it's complicated, there's lots of competition. So this type of a program allows you to streamline that process. You work directly with the federal government customer to craft the scope of work, the terms and conditions of your contract. It's a much more streamlined way to get that contract awarded, and you're not having to compete with a lot of other contractors. So there's no other program I'm aware of other than maybe some other things like HubZone and, as you mentioned, the women-owned businesses that have this type of capability, but these are one of the largest categories of companies that can benefit from this kind of program.
So just talking about the value of 8A and the value of sole source contracting. I know for me on the Air Force side, when I was putting companies on contract, extremely difficult to put a company on contract via sole source, meaning proving, because the government had to prove that there was basically no other company that could do the work. Like that's how we would do it. Even if it was like blatantly obvious, we would have to I can remember having to like brief general officers and stuff on, hey, that's why we're awarding this contract. And so it can be either that no other company could do the work, or you've basically built something with this company that the cost to build it with another company would be astronomical, right? Like it's not in the budget, can't do it. So the value from my perspective is it makes giving a sole source contract very easy on the government side. And that's a big advantage for a company going in to be able to avoid that competition. And then if you combine it with being able to influence the government, right? Like, hey, if you find the opportunities early enough, hey, by the way, we're an 8A company. You could set this aside for 8A, or you could just award me the contract. No need to compete it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a beautiful thing.
Oh,
Yes.
interesting. So the first time that you were exposed to this, is this when you were working with the small business 8A company that you
It
mentioned?
was. Yeah. And the company, it was probably 3 or 4 years in business with it. But the Army, as you described, found this as an advantage, found our company as a company who could perform this type of work, and did not have to go through all those sole source justifications you otherwise would. We didn't have to be the only company in the world that could do this work. We just had to be a qualified company to do the work, and we were selected by the customer and went through the process. So now one of the distinctions here is that there are some limitations to that.
Okay.
So I think with traditional sole source justifications, you potentially could award contracts of pretty large value. For the AV program, there are thresholds. So, and they differentiate between manufacturing type contracts versus service type contracts. So the manufacturing contracts and AV can get a sole source contract up to $7 million Q value. For a services type contract, they can award it up to $4.5 million in value. So there are some thresholds, but for a small business, that's a pretty significant type of contract.
Do you know if those thresholds are by year or by the total contract value?
That is total contract value.
Okay. So if I can win in theory, I could win a services contract that was 1 year in length for $4.5 million, or a 3-year contract that was worth $4.5 million,
Yes,
not a 3-year contract that was worth $12 million.
that's right. That's my understanding. Yes.
Okay. Interesting. And it does, I often tell companies, don't hang your hat on the certifications, but there's two that move the needle, in my opinion. One of them is 8A, and the other one is service disabled, veteran-owned small business, especially if you're selling to a VA. So that's really where that one in particular comes in. With the 8A, there's also the tribal 8A. Can you
Yes.
talk a little bit about that piece of it?
Yes, and that's often misunderstood in the marketplace. But most 8As that people may run across are individually owned. They're owned by a person who started their business, and individually or with 1 or 2 other people own a business. If the primary owner of that business, who is 51% or more has 51% or more ownership, can prove that social and economic disadvantage, they can become 8A. There are also tribes. So there's the Native American tribes, there are Native Alaskan tribes, there's Native Hawaiian tribes. And the government treats them a little bit differently. Those organizations, since they support an entire group of people, the government provides them with some different advantages. So first and foremost, we were just talking about sole source contracts. And a very powerful tool they offer tribal 8As that individuals do not get is that there is no threshold in essence. They are exempt from the threshold on how large a contract can be sole source contract to them. Now, the DoD, they do put some requirements that you have to have very high level approvals if it gets above $100 million, but they are out there. When I was doing this many years ago, that threshold didn't exist, and there were multiple hundreds of millions of dollars and not higher sole source contracts to tribally owned 8As. So that is one of the main differences between those two types of 8As. The second is that a tribal organization, since they're supporting a group of people, sometimes hundreds or thousands of people, they can get multiple entities 8A certified, as long as each entity has its own unique NAICS code. So if each entity has a unique service or product offering, each entity can receive its own individual 8A certification. And they're looked upon as having a separate 8A certification that then runs through all of the different checks and balances, policies and procedures that other corporate entities run through as an 8A certified company.
Interesting. And I think what's probably important about that is there's a timeline associated with 8A, right? So
Yeah.
unlike some of these other certifications, you're not 8A forever.
No. Yeah, that's actually 9 years. So you're certified for 9 years. And as I said at the beginning, the whole goal of this program is to create and develop sustainable small businesses. So they don't want this to be something that a company relies on for its entire existence. They want it to be a program that helps facilitate the growth of a company so that ultimately they can stand on their own and compete as a small or large business among all the other similarly situated small businesses out. So that's the ultimate goal.
Okay. Yeah. And that makes sense. We've worked with a lot of companies and I've done a ton of consults with businesses where you could see the 8A, you could see the graph of their government contracts.
Yeah.
They get the 8A and it goes up and it goes up, and then they graduate from the program. And some of them, it's just, you don't see anything after that, right?
Yes.
See one or two things. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of maybe varying how you go on contract with the government, when you should do that, and maybe what you've seen that works for businesses in the past?
And actually, you bring up a good point because that is one part of the 8A program that a lot of people don't hear about unless you're intimately involved and actively working in a company. But the SBA, the Small Business Administration, has guidelines throughout that 9-year process where they measure the company on how much revenue is coming from sole source contracts versus competitive type contracts, whether it be government and or commercial, with that ratio increasing on the side of competitive awards as you go through the program. And if you don't meet those thresholds, you could be dropped from the program.
Interesting.
So there is some teeth that the SBA puts on this to really encourage and push the small business to not just rely on 8A, to avoid exactly what you described, to avoid that fall off, that waterfall at the end of the 9-year program. That is what they don't want to see.
Yeah. What I usually do with our clients is I'm a big fan of building the relationships with their officers that put you on contract. And you have a little bit of a jump start into selling to the government with this program. Incredibly important to not only maintain that relationship because it's a great way to sell, but also learning, okay, if I'm selling to the Department of Energy or Los Alamos Labs or to the Air Force, what other types of contract vehicles? Great. They put me on with 8A, whether it's through the relationship with the office or just doing some research, but we can see, all right, how are the other mechanisms for contracting in our industry being used in that office? So are they using the GSA schedule? Are they using a GWAC, simplified acquisitions? What is it? And so if you learn what those are as you're working with your clients, then you can start making, because those aren't vehicles you could just get on GSA. You get a nice 6-month, if you're lucky, application phase. If it's something like NASA Soup, you got to wait for an onboarding or for the contract to be recompeted. There might be some IDIQs that, you can work with the office, right? You doing good work. The contracting office may work with you to get you onto some of these vehicles. So can you think of any other things that you've recommended over the years or?
Yeah. So maybe not a mechanism, but one challenge that an 8A will often face and something they have to strive to avoid is taking on multiple contracts that don't allow them to build a core competence that has sustainability to it, right? So
Interesting.
you may be offered multiple contracts that are so different that it doesn't allow you to build a staff, a capability, a product that you can then build your reputation around. So my recommendation, it was when I was in 8As, and it's often a challenge because 8As, you're struggling, you're small. It's hard to turn down a business opportunity, but you have to keep that in light of the long-term objective of trying to build a sustainable business. And so building a core competency is something I highly recommend for each 8A team.
Started laughing a little bit when you mentioned that, because I remember I was running a office. It was called Kill Chain Integration Branch at Hanscom, and we did a bunch of stuff there, mainly, I guess you could say, technology development for military systems and whatnot, but certainly a lot of cyber. And I have a cybersecurity company set up a meeting, and they came in with a presentation and a capability statement. And this is to your point. I always say, be focused, know what the office does, like what are they working on, what are they trying to solve, and adapt your presentation and your CAPE statement to that. But they came in with, literally, if they had 100 different services they provided, like it was like you couldn't even grasp what they do. But then I still remember at least most of them were tech and cybersecurity focused, but then it was janitorial services, or the potty removal. I'm like, well, what? I don't even know what you guys do. Like you just came in and said you do everything.
Exactly.
I want to.
In some cases, it's even worse than that. Some of these will literally lead with the 8A as their value proposition.
Right.
You don't want to lead with your qualification as an 8A as your primary value to your customers. You want to lead with, we have capabilities in X, Y, and Z. Here's why we're better than a lot of others. And oh, by the way, if you really like, well, we do have this 8A qualification that can streamline the acquisition. So
that's the cherry on top, right?
Yes.
That's what I was telling you. You're right, absolutely right. It's, no one wants to, I never even cared about the certifications, to be honest with you. All I wanted was the best company that I could put on contract to do the work. And I didn't even want to talk, I wasn't going to deal with a middleman. I wasn't going to deal with it. If they came in like selling the certifications, no, I want to know that A, you've done your homework and you understand the problem set that we're solving, and B, that you've done it before and that you're awesome at it. And then if there's an easy way, because not having a way to go on contract with the government can prevent them from putting you on contract. Absolutely true. So 8A is a great way to give the government a way to put you on contract. And the more of those ways that you have available, I would say those are kind of like the tools that you have. So I do the job awesome. We are subject matter experts. And by the way, we're 8A and we're on GSA, and maybe we're partnered with a company that's on one of your prime contracts, or maybe they could sub to us. And so now you're kind of giving them a bunch of different ways to put you on contract, and that can really be good. And, that's what I think the companies that grow over the years come to realize, is that we want to have as many of those that make sense so we can continue the good work we're doing.
Absolutely. And the SBA tries to set rules that sort of guide the small business to avoid getting a contract simply for the revenue and not to actually do the work. There are requirements that the small business, the 8A, has to perform the majority of the work on a contract that's sole source to them. So you can't just be a pass through. You can't just be a contracting mechanism to get to somebody else, and it avoids somebody just trying to use this for revenue purposes and not actually providing a valuable service.
Yeah, and you're right. A lot of people get that wrong. I think a lot of people see that 8A and they think, oh, this 8A, I'm going to be able to, the term they're using is middleman, I'm going to be able to just be the pass-through, find the subs, do work, they'll award it to me because I'm 8A. Nope. Yeah. You need to be the expert. You need to do the work. You're going to be the prime. And the people that are actually succeeding at this they're good companies. They're businesses that do what they do very well. And that's why they're going on contract. And then they use the mechanisms that the government gives them to streamline it, give them a little bit of an advantage here and there. Perfectly acceptable. What do you think about when I work with a client and we talk about the process for selling and using the 8A? We usually have like a variety of strategies, I guess you could say, based on how the company's set up. So when I'm looking at the steps I'm going to take with a company that has 8, I might be looking at 8A contracts that are expiring, right? And if they're services contracts that I think are going to be recompeted, I might be looking for opportunities that we're a perfect fit for, that I find them early enough so I can maybe ask the government to set them aside for us. What are some things that have worked for you and some of the clients that you've worked with over the years?
Sure, yeah. I think one thing is finding the agencies that buy whatever it is that you are trying to sell. And this goes back to what we talked about in terms of core competency or a core product that you're offering, right? This becomes much more difficult if you're spread so wide that you're looking at the entire federal government and willing to work with for anybody to provide anything, because it's going to be overwhelming. But if you can be much more specific about what it is you're trying to offer, then you can narrow down the number and the types of customers that you need to reach out to and build relationships. And like any other business, it is relationships, right? So it's finding those government agencies and ultimately the people within those agencies that buy your product or service.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point.
And early in the process, this is going to be very hard, right? So when you're very young in the program, it's just like when you're getting your first job, right? Everyone's always going to look for, what do you have on your resume that provides evidence that you can do this work, right? So the federal government's going to say, what past performance do you have to demonstrate that you can perform this work?
Yep.
So SBA, they've been doing this a long time. Maybe understand all these nuances, and they've actually provided another mechanism to alleviate that challenge. And that is through joint venture agreements.
Well, what's a joint venture?
Yeah, so I don't think you and I have even talked about this, but so the government allows an 8A entity to form a joint venture with a large business of any size. And when you compete for a contract, you, as the small business, or as the joint venture, I should say, you're able to use all of the past performance of your large company partner as past performance to win that work. So it provides you, it eliminates that restriction or barrier to get new work if you can form a joint venture with somebody. And they don't have to be large. It could be another small business that's in your field that you build a relationship with, and you jointly, and it could be a benefit for the other business too, right? Maybe there are 8A type contracts, a competitive 8A contract that small business or large business cannot go after on their own, but under a joint venture agreement with you as an 8A, they can participate with.
So you could have a joint venture with a non-8A company.
Absolutely. Yeah. Typically they are with non-8A companies. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's a great way to kind of beat down that past performance requirement and
Yes.
maybe, get around that a little bit. That is really interesting.
Yeah. So that's very powerful. And again, a lot of people don't know that or understand that, but joint ventures are another key advantage of the 8A program.
Is 8A the only program that allows for joint ventures, or can anyone form a joint venture?
I'm familiar with it on the 8A side. They may have that ability. I'm sure, you certainly can do that on, as a legal entity. I'm just not sure what other advantages might be offered to service disabled vets or other types of.
Okay, interesting. So joint venture, great way to kind of get around, I shouldn't say get around the past performance, but you're basically partnering with another company and drafting off of their past performance. And that's potentially going to help you get in there.
Yeah.
You also mentioned understanding who buys what you sell, like who's buying what you sell and who buys what you sell and utilizes the 8A program. So I just wanted to throw out for those watching, this is something that you can do. You can go to usaspending.gov to get at least the wave tops of this. And if you have depending on what you're selling, you may have a NAICS code or PSC code that lines up well. And I have plenty of videos on USA Spending, so they can go and watch that now. But you can go in there, look back the past 5 years, plug in your NAICS code, or, if it's accounting or legal or some type of services thing, and it's going to bring up all of the spending. But then you want to run that same search again, and you want to look at the spending that was awarded to 8A companies. And you can look, I think you can do it by 8A set aside or 8A sole source. So obviously it's going to, if the first search brings up $1 billion in contracts, once you click 8A, it's going to go down dramatically. But what it's going to do is it's going to show you how much is being spent. And it's also going to show you which agency. So it might be DOD coming up at the top without doing that search for 8A. Then you click the 8A button, and then it comes back and it's Homeland Security or, the VA, or maybe it's a different organization within the DOD. Maybe it's the Army or the Corps of Engineers. But now you can see the exact at least the sub-agency that uses that 8A the most with your NAICS code or product service code. So now you have a pretty good idea of who we're targeting. And for free, you can go in there and look at the individual contracts and get, now you can dive into what's the exact office, who was actually putting this on, what were these contracts for? You could pay a little extra money and use something like Dublin IQ to kind of have that done for you. But I just want to throw that out there for anyone. So if they were like, well, hey, how do I figure out who's buying what we sell and who uses 8A? And I think you made a good point because you're eliminating. I mean, federal government is a massive environment. You want to eliminate as much as you can. Focus on the offices that are going to move the needle for you.
Yeah, another example of kind of what you're describing is I know you've done some podcasts on SAM.gov. Just looking on SAM.gov for contracts that are or RFPs looking for similar products or services that you're offering, and simply finding out who are the contracting officers buying those types of services. That's one way. For technology companies, I've used this in the past. Companies who are providing a unique type of technology or trying to develop a unique technology. You may have talked to your audience before about SBIRs, the Small Business Innovative Research Program.
Mm-hmm.
I've often used the SBIR program, and the DoD has a website. All of the programs ever awarded and to be awarded are all listed on the DoD CIBR site. And when you go there, you can look up your technology that you're trying to develop or that you're actively working on. It'll bring up through keywords all of the types of programs that have been awarded. And it gets even better because most of those will list the technical person and their phone number and email in a lot of cases for the person within the agency that has purchased that type of a technology in the past or is currently trying to purchase that technology. So that for technology companies, I highly recommend you're looking at SBIR programs to find and really, whittle down to the specific person who might be interested in what you're off.
Yeah, that's great advice. Picking up the phone. I often talk about calling the TPOC, the technical point of contact on these when even if you're applying for one, not to go down a rabbit trail, but if you're applying or trying to get onto a CIBR, that first couple of weeks is the only time you can usually reach out and talk to them. Find so much information if you just pick up the phone.
Absolutely.
Schedule a meeting. The use cases that topic is for, one of them might be listed in the solicitation, but maybe even not, right? I've learned a ton about who's going to be using it, the different units that want to use it, why they want to use it, and all that stuff you can put in your proposal when you actually write it. If there's a company out there that has questions about 8A, Kevin, and, wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach out?
So yeah, I'll provide my phone number and email. My phone number is 586-943-9907, or shoot me an email at M3, consulting@yahoo.com. That's M3consulting@yahoo.com.
You're a brave man. You're doing all the information.
Well, you don't always have to answer, but at least we have it.
There you go. Well, everyone, you have it here. Kevin, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. I think the 8A program is something that is, first of all, it's not widely known. And those that hear of it don't really understand how to fully utilize it and maybe some of the things to watch out for. So hopefully, I know I learned something here. So I'm imagining anybody that's watching this and it has 8A or is going to get it and picked up really some good details and strategies, hopefully, to help them with their government contracts.
Cool. Good. Hopefully it helps somebody.
Sounds good. All right. Well, I'll see you back out there in the war room.
Sounds great. All right, Ray. Thanks a lot.
Take care.
See ya. Bye-bye.